First up, we have some big ChatGPT updates. So, OpenAI just announced some significant updates for ChatGPT, and these kind of hold some serious potential to transform how we're all using ChatGPT, as I assume most of us are. The updates include things like, first up, we now have prompt examples rolling out. So, at the beginning of a new chat, you'll now see examples to help you get started engaging with ChatGPT. It also is going to start giving you suggested replies. So ChatGPT will now suggest relevant ways to continue your conversation based on what you already have asked it or talked to it about. What's really cool as well is GPT-4 is now selected by default if you are starting a new chat as a Plus user. Typically, it would default to GPT 3.5. So now you'll automatically be on GPT-4 by default. You're also able to now upload multiple files. So, for anyone who doesn't realize, the code interpreter beta feature for Plus users allows you to upload files to actually start analyzing data and generating insights. And you can now do that with more than one file. You're going to no longer be logged out every single 2 weeks, which is kind of nice. That was a bit of a frustration for some users. And there are also now some keyboard shortcuts, which you can go to the link in the show notes to see what those are, just basically ways to work faster in ChatGPT. Missing from the latest updates that were documented by OpenAI was something that was spotted on Twitter by entrepreneur Neil Khosla. And I've confirmed it in my ChatGPT Plus account. It looks like there are no longer caps on messages in GPT-4. It used to be, I think, 50 every 3 hours after they raised the limit. I'm no longer seeing any documentation in ChatGPT Plus that tells you there's a limit. So it looks like that may also be gone as well. So, first up, I found it pretty interesting that OpenAI is now offering prompt examples and suggested replies. So, Paul, these seem like hugely valuable features, but do they devalue or kind of remove the need for having prompt engineering skills?
I don't think so. I mean, we've talked about this as, prompting is definitely gives you a leg up in terms of getting value out of these systems, but it's also probably the greatest friction point to getting
Hmm.
value out of these systems. And the companies building these models know that. So it's inevitable that they're going to build prompting capabilities into these systems that rely less on the human's ability to give the prompt. Because the better the system at is interpreting or enhancing the prompt it's given, whether it shows you it or it's happening behind the scenes, the quicker you're going to get value out of these systems and the more value you'll get from them. So from the beginning, we've said, I mean, going back to December, we probably have podcast episodes talking about over time, your ability to prompt is probably going to become less important. Um, and we've seen that, like I think I mentioned, Runway Gen 2, when I first went into their mobile app, it seemed like they took it away at some point, but it would take your prompt and it would actually give you like 3 or 4 enhancements to your prompt and say, "Is this better?" And most times it was. And so what you realize is they're learning a ton of how to properly prompt these systems. And so right now there's a bit of an art and a science to it, but my assumption has always been that these companies will eventually reduce the importance of the human's ability to prompt. So I think we're starting to see that here. I know you can already see, like, even with the suggested replies you talk about. So, like, Google search generative experience has that where it recommends follow on questions. We're starting to see that where it'll kind of like prompt you of other things to be asking the system. And in some ways, that's injecting the prompts themselves. But yeah, I think it's obvious that where it's going is either all of them, you'll either put your prompt in and it'll behind the scenes make that prompt better without you seeing what it's doing, or it'll show you suggested alternatives that are just more enriched versions of your prompt. And they're often probably going to be better than your. Now, the other thing is you will learn how to better prompt by seeing this because
Mhm.
you're going to be seeing what they think good prompts look like. And so you'll probably start to become better at it. So it's not that prompting as a skill isn't going to be valuable. It's just we won't rely as much on it in the future as we do today to get value from these systems.
So it also seemed to me, given how valuable we found Code Interpreter to be, that kind of uploading multiple files is somewhat of a big deal, especially if you're an audience member who hasn't used Code Interpreter or is new to it. I mean, this thing is pretty impressive. And I was wondering if maybe you could just kind of walk us through at a high level, zooming out a little bit, why this data analysis functionality is so important.
Yeah, well, most of us just aren't very good at it. I mean, especially if we're talking, about marketers and business executives, a lot of people that listen to this show, it's just not your course competency. So you and I both can do data analysis. It's not what we were trained to do. We've developed those skills through the years. But I always look at it, I'm sure I have a ton of blind spots when it comes to data analysis. Like even when I go into Excel, I can do the basic functions and I can build pivot tables and I can do some stuff. But I'm sure that I know maybe about 10% of the actual capabilities of Excel.
Mm,
And so if you just imagine what a data scientist or someone who has more advanced data analysis capabilities can do with Excel and some data, I can't do most of that. So just to have that, I mean, in some cases, people say it's like almost a PhD level data analyst that you can call up at any moment. Say, here's my data. What should I be asking of this? How should I visualize this data? So just imagine having that at your fingertips 24/7 for $20 a month, like as
yeah.
a part of it. So I think that's the stuff, and that's where Ethan Mollick, who I mentioned, up front on the on demand, who was one of our keynotes. He's done some of the coolest stuff I've seen in terms of sharing ways he's applying Code Interpreter. But I do think that that's going to be one of the most immediate value creators for this whole generative AI movement as
Mm,
these tools, one, Code Interpreter gets wider use, but two, those same capabilities eventually get baked into Excel and to Google Sheets. And all of us, like all knowledge workers, have these like on demand data analyst capabilities. It's going to be transformative for a lot of knowledge work that's done. So I think we're just starting to see what tools like Code Interpreter are going to be able to do. It's very early, but it's exciting to me because again, I love these AI tools that are additive.
mhm.
Like there's if we had 100-person company, we wouldn't have a data analyst on staff. Like it's not replacing any jobs. It is like giving us a superpower we just otherwise wouldn't have.
Mhm.
And so I think for a lot of marketers and business people, tools like Code Interpreter are going to be an additive AI thing that enhances what we're capable of without affecting any jobs. And that's exciting to me. Like I love those kinds of use cases.